Hey there, everybody. It's Luke from Team Copperhead. We made it to the round of 32. Woo! Heck yeah. All right. So, leading up to this fight with Rotator, we had just fought Ripperoni, and boy, did we take a lot of damage. It was a ton of work getting Copperhead back together. Working on Copperhead's been a lot of work. Our team is running pretty lean. Typically, at this point of the tournament, I think we only had like 4 people on our team. And compared to other teams, like Bloodsport or Witch Doctor, they got like 1,000 people on their team. We don't have any of that. Typically in the past, Copperhead is pretty bulletproof, doesn't require a lot of maintenance, but this season was pretty tough, and getting the robot ready with such a small team is not easy. So every season of BattleBots, we always have 2 fully working robots. But after competing with Copperhead for 3 previous seasons, we're running kind of low on spare parts, at least the critical things like the robot frame rails. In our first fight against Bloodsport, they pretty much annihilated 1 frame rail, and then our backup frame rail got really messed up against Ripperoni. So going into the round of 32, we're already frantically trying to do some serious repairs where in previous seasons we would just swap out to backup parts. So before this fight, we had to go to the Lincoln Electric tent, re-weld a bunch of things, bend parts back with a 100-ton press, and it's a lot more work than what we're typically used to doing on Team Copperhead. So Rotator is a real tricky robot to fight. It's an undercutter, can run right side up, can be just standard undercutter, but it also has wedgelets. So that makes it really difficult to plan for. Usually when robots fight horizontals, they just put a big static wedge on, but then Rotator will come at you with some forks and get right underneath you. So for this fight, we had to run our standard fork configuration. We were worried that if we ran our crossbar that we usually use for horizontals, that Rotator would come right at us and our weapon wouldn't be able to make contact with them. And what we noticed right before the fight with Rotator is that as soon as I bumped into the wall in the test box, one of the drive sides would just cut out. And our heart sank because, just bumping into the wall and having your robot kind of fail a little bit is not a good sign, especially for a combat robot. But we were just about to load into the big arena. We didn't want to delay production. I don't think we've ever delayed production, so we didn't want this to be the first time. I was also just mentally exhausted from working on the robot. It just took so many hours fixing that thing, so we just said, what the heck, let's just put it in the arena and hope for the best. So as soon as this match started, we knew that we had problems. As I said, we noticed some issues with the right drive side in the test box, and as soon as we started the fight, after the first collision, we noticed that the drive side would cut out. So in the very beginning of the fight, I eased in real slowly. I didn't want to throw any overcurrent faults on the drive or anything, just try to line up a shot, and sure enough we did. We did get 1 hit, but the weapon wasn't fully spun up, so we just kind of were stuck together there for a minute, and then we freed ourselves. But that's when it became apparent that we were having some serious drive problems. So for the first half of the match, we would get a hit in, and I was just trying to point the robot at Rotator. Our weapon is super reliable, but knowing that we had a drive side out, all I was trying to do was really just point the drum at Rotator, and this became quite difficult to do. If you look carefully, every once in a while, the robot would turn to the right, and that's usually when a drive side was cutting out. So it took about, 50, maybe like a second before the drive side would kick back in. So the entire first half of the match, it was really just getting 1 hit in, waiting half a second for the drive to start working again, and then line up another hit. Eventually, halfway through the fight, we hit Rotator and we flipped ourselves over, and then flipped ourselves back over. And at that point, that's when our drive side completely died. One of the speed controllers just completely exploded. So at that point, we were just crab walking. So once we were crab walking, it was really just trying to show translational movement, trying to get a couple hits in. By this point in the fight, we thought we were ahead on points. We did a lot of damage to Rotator, but at the same time, it does not look good when you're crab walking. So really, it was just trying to show mobility and run out the clock, and boy, that timer couldn't have come any sooner. So once the buzzer went off, the match was over, and I was pretty nervous. I knew we did a lot of damage to Rotator, but you kind of get really hyper-focused on your own robot. Seeing that you were crab walking towards the end, you just think the worst that could ever happen. So when we heard that it was a unanimous judges decision, I was actually feeling pretty good, because I felt, we were probably ahead on points. I couldn't imagine that Rotator would have won unanimously, maybe a split decision, but yeah, sure enough, we got the win, and it was awesome. So we're on to the round of 16. So when the fight was over, we took the robot apart and we noticed that one of the speed controllers, the right drive side speed controller, was just complete charcoal. It smelled terrible. The smell of burnt MOSFETs is a very unique BattleBots smell, and it does not smell good. But yeah, that side of the robot was just complete darkness, all black, all burnt. But looking back, you know, we were trying to figure out what happened. And I think what happened was when repairing the robot from the Ripperoni fight. So during that fight, we had to replace a drive motor, a drive speed controller, and we're running VESC speed controllers, which can be really finicky. And if you don't tune them correctly, bad things can happen. And what I suspect happened was we just grabbed a random speed controller, a random motor, and we paired them together. And I did not calibrate the two. What a lot of people don't know is like each speed controller has to be tuned to the motor. They have these encoders on them that are never quite perfect. So you actually have to run a motor detection and a calibration process. And we just completely skipped that. We had a lot of long hours, didn't get a lot of sleep, and it was just something that I think we overlooked. And I think that's ultimately why the speed controller exploded. I can't say for sure. So our next fight is Endgame. Endgame's won the giant bolt. They've won a giant nut. These guys are serious. One of the most professional teams. And we were quite worried. I think before the tournament started, I was worried about two robots. That was Huge and Endgame, and they're both on our side of the bracket. Now we gotta fight Endgame, so it's gonna be tough. I didn't want to fight these guys, but who knows, you know? Anything can happen.